Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive, and this time we're going way back to explore the lives of hunter-gatherers.
Really fascinating stuff, yeah.
Yeah, we've got a whole bunch of videos and other sources we've been looking at
Right.
because, there are no written records from those days.
hmm
It's a real challenge to try to picture,
Yeah, like a big puzzle.
yeah, what their daily lives were like. But you know what? One of the things that really surprised me, and we'll talk about this in more detail later, is that it seems like women might have played a much bigger role than we thought,
Yeah, that's right.
especially when it comes to things like cave paintings.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
always pictured, cavemen out there hunting,
Right.
bringing down the mammoth and that.
And drawing on the cave walls afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Mm.
like the classic image.
Yeah. Well, it turns out there's some pretty compelling evidence that challenges that whole idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah. See, researchers have been analyzing the handprints that are found in many caves,
Good.
and some of these handprints date back like 40,000 years or more, which is incredible.
Wow, that's old.
It is. And what's really interesting is that when they looked at the size and shape of these handprints,
Okay.
a lot of them seem to have been made by women.
Hmm. So that kind of throws a wrench in the whole
Yeah.
men are the artists
Yeah.
narrative, I guess.
Yeah, it really does challenge our assumptions, doesn't it?
Yeah, so were the women just kind of hanging out back at the cave, decorating while the guys were out hunting, or?
I think it's more complicated than that.
Yeah,
It's really easy to kind of fall into the trap of projecting our own modern ideas about gender roles onto the past,
right.
but we have to be careful about that.
Yeah, makes sense.
What if those cave paintings weren't just about hunting? What if they were also about, like, spirituality
Okay.
or documenting different aspects of their lives, maybe even a way to express themselves creatively?
Right. So it's like you can't just look at modern graffiti and
Yeah.
assume it's
Okay.
all about, gangs marking territory or something.
Yeah, there's so much more to it.
Right?
And there's probably a lot more to those cave paintings than we realize.
For sure. So when we talk about hunter-gatherers, we are talking about a way of life that, like, dominated for a really long time, right?
Yeah, we're talking about the entire old Stone Age, basically,
Okay.
which stretched from something like 2.5 million years ago
Wow.
all the way to about 10,000 BC.
That's like most of human history.
It really is, yeah. For the vast majority of human existence, that's how our ancestors lived.
It really makes you think about, like, what we can learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially today when we're so disconnected from nature and everything.
Exactly. I think one of the key things to understand about hunter-gatherers is this concept of the means of existence.
Okay, means of existence.
Yeah, it basically means that everything in their lives revolved around survival.
Right, that makes sense.
Their social structures, their beliefs, even their art. It all stemmed from this fundamental need to survive in a world that was constantly changing.
So, like, no grocery stores or
Nope.
online shopping back then.
Not even close. They lived in small, nomadic groups, always on the move,
Right.
following the migrations of animals, the seasons, wherever they could find food and resources.
Wow. Talk about a minimalist lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely minimalist.
But, I mean, they must have had to be incredibly resourceful, too.
Oh, absolutely. They were masters of using whatever nature provided. They made
Right.
tools out of stone, bone, wood, you name it.
Yeah.
Developed really intricate hunting strategies.
Wow.
And they had this incredible knowledge of plants, which they used for food, medicine, even building materials.
Like, they were like walking Wikipedias.
Yeah, pretty much. They couldn't just Google how to make fire or...
Or look up what plants were safe to eat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why this whole idea that hunter-gatherers were somehow simple or primitive is just wrong.
Yeah. I think that's a misconception a lot of people have.
It is. Their way of life demanded incredible skill, knowledge, and observation.
Right.
They had to be adaptable, innovative, and most importantly, they had to work together.
Right. So speaking of working together, I'm curious about how these societies were actually structured.
Okay, yeah.
Like, did they have leaders? Did they have laws? Or was it more of a...
Oh, that's a good question. They didn't have the kind of complex political systems that we have today,
Right.
With presidents and parliaments and all that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just chaos either.
Okay.
They relied on strong social bonds and a kind of shared decision-making process.
I see.
Think of it more like a really close-knit community
Okay.
where everyone had a role to play and their survival depended on cooperation.
Yeah, that makes sense. There was one thing I read about that really kind of creeped me out in a fascinating way, I guess you could say.
Oh, okay. What was that?
This term Grafgiften.
Ah, yeah, Graf Giften.
I don't even know how to say it, but
You got it.
I saw that in the research and it just kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting concept. Basically, it refers to the objects that were buried with the dead in these societies.
So like tools, jewelry, weapons, things like that.
Yeah, all kinds of things. Even animal remains sometimes. It's
Wow.
like they were packing them for a really long journey.
Right. It makes you wonder why they did that.
Well, a lot of researchers believe it gives us some clues about their beliefs about the afterlife.
Okay.
Maybe they saw death as a journey,
Yeah.
and these objects were like provisions for the deceased in the next world.
So like sending them off with a friendly charged phone and a
Yeah, like
good book or something.
exactly.
It could also be a way of honoring the dead, though, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like recognizing their skills and status.
Yeah. For instance, a skilled hunter might be buried with his finest spear,
Oh, okay.
or a respected elder with some intricate beadwork or something like that.
I can't help but picture archaeologists thousands of years from now, like digging up our stuff and trying to figure out what it all means.
I know, right? Like, what are they going to think when they find a
Like a half-eaten bag of chips or,
exact?
a selfie stick.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
Yeah, it really does. But I guess that's what's so fascinating about material culture, right?
It is.
It can tell us so much about a society's beliefs and values.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like they're sending them off with everything they need for the afterlife, right?
Right, like their favorite stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
But you know what's even more interesting?
What's that?
There are still hunter-gatherer groups living in the world today.
Wait, really? I
Yeah.
thought that way of life, like, disappeared ages ago.
You'd think so, right? But there are a few groups, mostly in very remote areas,
Okay.
like rainforests or the Arctic.
Wow, that's amazing. So they're like living links to the past.
They really are, yeah. It's like having a window into how humans lived for thousands and thousands of years.
It's incredible. I bet they face a lot of challenges in the modern world, but they must also hold so much wisdom and knowledge.
Absolutely. And their lifestyles often emphasize things that we're kind of rediscovering now, like a deep connection to nature
Right.
and sustainable practices.
Okay, so what can we learn from them? Like, what kind of insights do they offer?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is just how adaptable humans are.
Okay.
They show us that we can thrive in all kinds of environments, from deserts to the Arctic,
Right.
by using our ingenuity and traditional knowledge.
That's so cool. I mean, imagine having to hunt your own food or build your own shelter from scratch.
Yeah, it really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It does. And they must have such an intimate knowledge of their surroundings.
Oh, absolutely. They understand the ecosystems they live in,
Yeah.
the behavior of animals, the plants they can use for food and medicine, everything.
Wow. It's like they have this whole encyclopedia of knowledge in their heads.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And they've mastered skills that most of us have completely lost.
Yeah, for sure. And let's not forget the importance of social cooperation in their survival.
Right. Oh, that's crucial.
I mean, they rely on each other
Yeah.
for everything.
Absolutely. They have strong community bonds, shared decision-making,
Right.
and they support each other through thick and thin.
That's something I think we've lost a bit in modern society.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Those videos we were talking about earlier, some of them showed some amazing examples of the tools and techniques they used.
Oh, yeah, those were really fascinating.
Yeah, those intricately crafted stone tools.
I know, right? And to think they made those with such simple materials,
It's incredible.
and each tool was designed for a specific purpose.
Yeah, like scraping hides, hunting, preparing food, even making art.
Exactly. It's mind-blowing how resourceful they were.
And it wasn't just tools, right?
No, they used natural materials for everything.
Like a,
Shelters, clothing, baskets, weapons, you name it.
wow. It's like they were living in a completely sustainable world.
In a way, they were. They took only what they needed from nature,
Right.
and they didn't leave a lot of waste behind.
It's a stark contrast to how we live today.
It really is. But maybe there's some lessons we can learn from their approach.
I think so, yeah. Especially when it comes to facing our own environmental challenges.
Right. I mean, they understood that their survival depended on maintaining a balance with nature.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think we've lost sight of that a bit.
It seems like it sometimes. But by studying these ancient ways of life,
Yeah,
we can rediscover some valuable insights.
absolutely. It's not just about the past, it's about the present and the future, too.
Exactly. It's about understanding our place in the world and finding inspiration for a better way forward.
I totally agree. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this topic, though.
I know, it's so fascinating. But Unfortunately, we're running out of time for this deep dive.
I know, right? It's like we could go on forever. But before we wrap up, let's maybe just touch on some of the key things that we've learned about hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
I mean, where do we even begin?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, right? But I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways is that, like, our understanding of these societies is always changing.
Right.
You know, like the idea that women might have a much bigger role than we thought, that's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly learning new things.
Exactly. And those handprints in the caves, that really got me thinking.
Yeah, me too. And it's just amazing to think that these societies, which we often think of as simple or primitive, they actually thrived for like tens of thousands of years.
Yeah, they were incredibly resilient.
Yeah, they adapted, they understood their environment. There's so much we can learn from them, especially today.
Absolutely. Especially when we're facing so many challenges like climate change and everything.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like hunter-gatherers, they lived in a way that was sustainable, you know?
Right. They didn't waste anything.
Yeah, they took only what they needed. They understood that balance with nature was important.
Exactly. And that's something we really need to pay attention to now.
Yeah, for sure. And, the whole idea of community, that's another thing that really stood out to me.
Oh, definitely. Their emphasis on cooperation, on sharing, on supporting each other, that's really inspiring.
Yeah, like they knew that they had to work together to survive.
Right. It wasn't about individualism, it was about the group.
Yeah, that's a powerful message, I think.
It really is. And that's what I love about exploring these topics.
Mm.
It not only teaches us about the past, but it also makes us think about the present and the future.
Absolutely. It's like a journey through time that brings us back with like fresh perspectives and a
Totally.
new way of seeing things.
Yeah, it really is. So, as we wrap up, is there like one thing that you really want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Hmm. It's, I guess I would say just remember that like the human story is full of surprises.
Yeah, definitely.
We're always learning new things, reinterpreting the past, and who knows what else is out there waiting to be discovered.
Right, that's what makes it so exciting.
Totally. It's a never-ending quest for knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of quests, we have a little challenge for you, our listeners. We talked about graph gifting earlier, those objects that were buried with the dead
Yeah.
and how they kind of reflected a person's life and values. So we want to know, what objects would you choose as your own graph gifting?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, what would you want future generations to know about you based on the things you left behind?
Yeah, think about it, everyone, and let us know in the comments below.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and while you're at it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives like this one.
Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next historical adventure.
Absolutely. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of the past.
We'll see you soon. Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going way back, like way, way back to explore how humans went from, like roaming around hunting and gathering to settling down and farming.
Yeah.
It's like this big turning point,
Yeah,
that kind of set the stage for, well, for like everything we know as civilization.
it really is.
So for this deep dive, we've got a whole bunch of stuff. Actually, we've got some YouTube videos and some pretty in-depth PDFs.
And it's amazing that this shift, which, archaeologists call it like the Neolithic Revolution, it didn't just happen like in one place.
Right.
Our sources, they show that it kind of popped up in different parts of the world almost like at the same time.
Yeah, it's like everybody got the memo to start farming.
You're right.
But there was no internet or anything back then.
Exactly right.
Okay, so where should we like even begin with this journey?
Well, I think we got to start in the Fertile Crescent,
Okay.
this region in the Middle East. And just imagine like a place with super rich soil, tons of rivers like the Tigris and the Euphrates. Back then, it was like paradise for hunter-gatherers, like just teeming with wild plants and animals.
Okay, so I'm picturing like, nice lush landscape rivers, flowing. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it was.
So why would anybody trade that in for like the hard work of farming?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, there's not just one answer, but our sources point to a few key things like climate change.
Okay.
So as that last ice age ended, the climate warmed up, rainfall became more predictable, and it just made it way easier to grow crops reliably.
So like a change in the weather could have pushed people towards farming.
Possibly, yeah.
What else?
Well, some researchers think that as like the hunter-gatherer populations grew, they started putting more pressure on all the resources they had available.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so maybe there were like these little food shortages here and there that kind of pushed people to find a better way to get food, and that's where farming came in.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Exactly, but it wasn't just external pressures,
What's that?
Our sources highlight like human ingenuity too.
Hmm.
So over time, people started to like intentionally cultivate certain plants and they started taming animals.
Yeah.
This whole process of domestication led to a more controlled and reliable food supply.
So we've got climate change, we've got pressure on resources, and then we got this gradual development of domestication.
Mhm.
It's like all these things coming together to push humans towards this massive lifestyle change.
It really is. And it wasn't just like what they ate, it was a fundamental shift in like how humans live their whole way of life.
Yeah.
Think about it. Hunter-gatherers were nomads. They were always moving in small groups and, their possessions were limited to what they could carry.
Right.
But farming requires settling down, staying in one place to take care of those crops and livestock.
That's a huge change of going from like roaming free to being tied down to one spot.
It is.
What did that do to their social structure? I mean, did the shift to farming like create winners and losers?
Well, let's look at the archaeological evidence.
Okay.
One cool example is from early farming communities in the Netherlands. Our sources talk about the Bankeramic, the Trechterbeker, and the Kwakbeker cultures.
Wow, those are some interesting names.
Right, and they're named after their different pottery styles.
Okay, I remember seeing pictures of that pottery with those like intricate designs. I never realized how much those could tell us about early farmers.
Yeah, they tell a story.
Mhm.
The fact that they had the time and the resources to make such elaborate pottery suggests that they had a more settled lifestyle.
Okay.
A lifestyle where people could specialize in crafts. It's a far cry from, that minimalist hunter-gatherer life.
So pottery is like a sign of progress.
Not necessarily that simple.
Okay.
While like a settled life allowed them to have more possessions and develop, specialized skills, it also led to these social hierarchies.
Hmm.
The archaeological record shows differences in like the size of houses and how they were decorated, suggesting that some people had more wealth and status than others.
So farming might have brought stability, but it also maybe brought inequality.
It's a complicated picture, and it's one that we see in a lot of civilizations throughout history.
Yeah.
The shift to agriculture didn't benefit everybody equally.
That's a really good point. And speaking of benefits, our sources also talk about the link between farming and like the rise of cities.
Oh, absolutely. Surplus food production, which was made possible by agriculture, was the foundation for bigger populations in a smaller area.
Yeah.
And in the Fertile Crescent, we see some of the earliest cities popping up, driven by all that abundance from agriculture.
And with cities comes specialization, right? Not everybody has to be a farmer anymore.
Exactly. As those food surpluses grew, it freed up some people to focus on other things.
Okay.
We see craftspeople, merchants, priests, rulers, all emerging the building blocks of complex societies.
This is where things get really interesting. One of our sources mentions the invention of writing in the city of Uruk in Mesopotamia.
Right.
And get this, it was mainly used for record keeping, like to manage all those agricultural surpluses and to keep track of trade.
That's right. It's a pivotal moment. With writing, we go from prehistory to history. We have a direct look into the thoughts and lives of these ancient people.
So the need to keep track of all that grain led to written language.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big consequence of settling down.
It really is. And it highlights how something seemingly simple, like farming, can have these huge effects leading to things we could never have predicted.
So we've gone from small nomadic bands to settled communities, from basic survival to, the beginnings of complex societies. That's a huge transformation.
It is, and it didn't stop there. Our sources have a map showing how agriculture spread out from the Fertile Crescent, slowly but surely influencing other parts of the world.
Which brings us this idea of uneven historical development.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
It means that agriculture didn't reach every part of the world at the same time.
Right.
Different societies adopted farming at different speeds, leading to this like patchwork of social and technological development across the world.
Wow. So
Yeah.
it's like a ripple effect, but those ripples didn't spread out evenly? Some societies embraced farming early on, while others held on to their hunter-gatherer ways for a lot longer.
Yeah, and those differences in timing had some pretty lasting consequences.
Yeah.
Think of it like a global experiment in human development,
Right.
with different societies taking different paths.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this connects to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So if we zoom out and look at the Neolithic Revolution as a whole, what's the big takeaway here? Did this shift to farming actually benefit humanity?
That's a question that, historians and archaeologists are still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
On one hand, agriculture led to these larger, more stable populations, which in turn led to cities' specialized labor and all these advancements that came with that.
Right. But we also talked about some of the downsides, like more work, social inequality.
Exactly. And our sources point to other challenges too.
Oh,
For example, relying on just a few crops or animals made early farmers really vulnerable to things like disease and famine.
that makes sense.
And clearing land for agriculture led to deforestation and soil erosion in some places.
It's like this trade-off, a balancing act between progress and then the unintended consequences.
Exactly. And it's a theme that we still see playing out in the world today. We're
Yeah.
still struggling with how to feed a growing population in a way that's sustainable and equitable.
That's a really sobering thought.
Mm.
It makes me wonder, like, if we could go back and redo the Neolithic Revolution,
Mm.
knowing what we know now about the potential downsides of intensive agriculture, would we do things differently?
That's a great question, and it's one that researchers are actually exploring today.
Wow.
As they look for more sustainable farming practices, can we learn from the mistakes of the past to create a better future for food production?
It's like history isn't just, a bunch of facts and dates.
Right.
It's a source of valuable lessons, a
Yeah.
guide for dealing with the challenges we face today.
And a reminder that human progress, it's never a straight line.
Yeah.
It's full of twists and turns, unexpected consequences, and these constant adaptations.
So, dear listener, we've journeyed from these nomadic hunter-gatherers to, like, the dawn of civilization.
It's been quite a trip.
We explored the things that drove the Neolithic Revolution, and we dug up both its triumphs and its challenges.
I hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity about the origins of agriculture and its huge impact on human societies.
I hope so, too. And remember, this is just the beginning of the story.
That's right. There's so much more to learn.
Absolutely. And as always, we encourage you to dive deeper on your own. Check out the links to the sources we used in the show notes.
Yeah, they're all there for you.
Yeah, there's so much more to discover
Yeah.
about, like this whole period in human history.
And, a final thought to think about.
Okay.
If we could, reset, go back and start the Neolithic Revolution over,
Yes.
knowing what we know now,
Yeah.
what would we do differently? How could we, enjoy the benefits of agriculture, but, minimize the downsides?
That's a big question, right?
It is a big question.
It really makes us think about our relationship with, like, food and the environment and even social justice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd love to know what you guys think. What are your biggest takeaways from this deep dive?
Yeah, leave a comment below.
Yeah, let's keep talking about this.
And if you enjoyed this little journey through time,
Yeah.
don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah, we've got more deep dives coming your way into all sorts of fascinating topics. So until next time, stay curious. Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're going to go way back in time,
Oh, yeah.
and we're going to explore the emergence of the first cities.
Right.
So I'm really excited about this.
Yeah.
You've provided some really interesting sources,
Mhm.
a mix of educational PDFs,
Yeah.
and I'm really looking forward to diving in. So I think
Okay.
the big question we're tackling here is how did we go from, small nomadic hunter-gatherer groups
Yep.
to these large,
Mhm.
complex urban centers?
Exactly.
It's a huge leap in human history,
It is.
and there's so much to unpack.
Yeah, for sure. So to really get a grasp on this,
Yeah.
we have to start with a picture of life before cities.
Okay.
So imagine small groups of humans constantly on the move,
Right.
hunting and gathering for survival.
Mm-hmm.
Their lives completely intertwined with nature.
Yeah.
And this was the dominant way of life for the vast majority of human history.
Right.
So the shift to city life was a truly momentous change.
It really puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these nomadic groups.
Yes.
What happened next?
Well, around 10,000 BC, in a region we call the Fertile Crescent, something revolutionary occurred.
Right.
Agriculture.
Agriculture.
This area, spanning from Egypt through parts of the Middle East, had rich soil
Mm-hmm.
and was nourished by major rivers like the Nile,
Right.
the Tigris, and the Euphrates.
Ah, yes, the Fertile Crescent.
Yes,
It's practically synonymous with the birth of civilization.
absolutely.
But why were these rivers so important?
Well, these rivers would flood annually,
Okay.
and when they receded, they left behind incredibly fertile silt,
Oh, wow.
perfect for growing crops.
Oh.
Early humans figured out how to harness this developing irrigation techniques to control the water and make their harvests even more bountiful.
Okay.
The result?
What?
Surplus food.
Okay. Now that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, having extra food
Right.
must have had a huge impact on these societies.
Absolutely. For the first time, not everyone had to spend every waking moment hunting and gathering just to survive.
Oh, wow.
This meant that people could start to specialize in other skills.
Okay.
Some folks could focus on becoming expert toolmakers or pottery artisans,
Uh,
while others could dedicate themselves to trading goods.
so you're saying that a simple surplus of food led to the birth of specialized jobs trade and a more complex social structure.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
Think of it this way.
Okay.
We start to see three distinct ways of life emerging:
Okay.
agriculture, crafts, and trade.
Okay.
And suddenly, these people aren't just surviving side by side, they're relying on each other.
Right.
The seeds of a more interconnected, complex society are being sown.
That's a fascinating insight.
Yeah.
So these communities are growing, they're
Mhm.
becoming more interconnected.
Yes.
What happens next?
Well,
Is this how we get our first cities?
you got it.
Okay.
These growing communities, fueled by specialization and trade, eventually become our first cities. We're talking larger populations,
Hmm.
organized governance, sophisticated infrastructure like irrigation systems, and defensive walls.
Okay, I can definitely picture it.
Yes.
Walls, bustling trade,
Uh-huh.
people working different jobs.
Yeah.
It feels a lot more like the cities we know today.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can see this in early Mesopotamia with city-states like Sumeria.
Okay.
Each city-state functioned like its own independent mini-kingdom,
Mm.
with its own ruler laws and even armies.
So each city was essentially its own little world.
Exactly.
Fascinating.
But remember, there were different paths to early state formation. For example, ancient Egypt followed a different model.
Okay.
Instead of many independent city-states,
Hmm.
they unified Upper and Lower Egypt into a single nation-state,
Okay.
ruled by a pharaoh.
So different approaches, but both rooted in this key transition from nomadic life to settled agriculture
Yes.
and specialized roles within the society.
Hmm.
What I'm curious about is, were these early cities some kind of utopia? Was everyone happily farming and crafting together in perfect harmony?
Well, not quite. They
Right.
were definitely a far cry from a utopia.
Okay.
These cities had very clear social hierarchies.
Right.
Imagine a pyramid structure.
Okay, I'm picturing this pyramid.
Yeah.
Who's at the bottom?
Sadly, at the very bottom, you would find slaves.
Oh, okay.
Above them were the farmers,
Oh, wait.
who made up the largest portion of the population.
Mm.
Then came the artisans, crafting all sorts of goods.
Okay.
And higher up still, we find the priests,
Yeah.
who held considerable power due to the importance of religion in these societies.
Right. Religion was deeply intertwined with every aspect of life back then.
It was.
And of course, at the very top of the pyramid.
Is the king or the pharaoh,
Right.
the ultimate ruler?
Makes sense. Speaking of religion, what were the people in these ancient cities worshiping?
Both Mesopotamian and Egyptian cities were polytheistic,
Okay.
meaning they believed in many gods and goddesses.
Right.
Temples weren't just places of worship, they are often centers of civic life as well.
So religion and governance were really closely linked,
Yes.
much more so than we're used to today.
Yeah.
And, speaking of pivotal developments, there's one we can't forget,
Right.
the invention of writing.
Absolutely.
Both Mesopotamia with its cuneiform script
Uh-huh.
and Egypt with its hieroglyphs
Yes.
developed sophisticated writing
They're
systems.
very sophisticated.
And this was absolutely monumental.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
No more relying solely on oral tradition.
Exactly.
Writing wasn't just about communication.
Right.
It allowed for record keeping, lawmaking,
Yes.
and the transmission of knowledge across generations.
It's incredible.
It's hard to overstate how important that was.
It really is.
It basically marks the end of prehistory and the dawn of recorded history.
Yes.
It's a turning point for humanity.
Absolutely a turning point.
Yeah.
For sure.
We'll be right back to continue exploring this fascinating topic.
Okay. Welcome back to the deep dive.
So before the break, we were talking about the invention of writing,
Right.
a pivotal moment in human history.
It's incredible to think about, isn't it?
It is.
How this one development, the ability to record our thoughts and knowledge, changed everything.
Yeah, and what's fascinating to me
What's that?
is how many parallels we can draw
Okay.
between these ancient cities
Right.
and our modern urban centers.
Yeah.
Even though they existed thousands of years ago,
Hmm.
we can see the roots of so many aspects of our lives today
Oh, for sure.
in those early civilizations.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What kind of parallels are we talking about?
Well, think about specialization,
Okay.
which we talked about earlier.
Right.
It's still a fundamental principle of our modern economy.
Oh, yeah.
We have a mind-boggling array of specialized jobs today,
We do.
from software developers to surgeons,
Right.
and we rely on each other's expertise, just like those early artisans and traders did.
That's true. I mean, I can't build a computer or perform surgery.
Yeah,
I rely on others for that.
exactly.
It's amazing to think that this interdependence we see today
Uh-huh.
goes all the way back to ancient times.
It really does highlight how fundamental these concepts are to human society.
Yeah.
And another great example is trade.
Okay.
It flourished in ancient cities just like it does today,
Right.
only now it's on a global phenomenon
Right.
connecting us across continents.
Yeah.
We can order something online
Hmm.
and have it shipped from the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And it all started with those early marketplaces.
That's a great point. The seeds of global trade
Yes.
were sown thousands of years ago.
Uh-huh.
And, there's another parallel that just struck me.
What's that?
Governance.
Oh, yeah.
Just like those early city-states and kingdoms,
Mm-hmm.
we still rely on systems of law in order to manage complex populations.
Exactly. Our systems might be more elaborate.
Right.
But the basic need for rules and leadership to ensure some degree of order, that's something humans figured out way back then.
Right. We've got laws, courts, elected officials.
Yeah.
It's all a way of creating structure and managing a large group of people living together.
Absolutely.
And you know what else?
What?
Ancient cities were centers of culture and innovation,
They were.
just like cities today.
Absolutely. Temples and marketplaces drew people together,
Yeah.
just as our museums, theaters, and restaurants do today.
Right.
Cities have always been magnets for talent, ambition, and creativity.
It's like they concentrate all this human energy and potential into one place.
Yeah,
It's no wonder they become hubs for so much creativity and innovation.
that's exactly right. It's
Yeah.
this concentration of people and ideas that makes cities such dynamic and ever-evolving places.
Yeah.
And it all started back in those ancient settlements, from the bustling streets of ancient Sumeria to the towering skyscrapers of today's megacities. The human impulse to create, connect, and build something bigger than ourselves is a constant thread throughout history.
It's incredible to think about the journey from those first small agricultural settlements
Yeah.
to the massive, sprawling urban landscapes we have today.
It is amazing.
But as you were saying, there are so many connections between then and now.
There are.
It makes you realize that history isn't just about dates and names.
Right.
It's about understanding the roots of our own modern society.
And while we can marvel at the ingenuity of our ancient ancestors,
Yeah.
we also have to recognize that cities have always faced challenges.
Oh, of course.
Those challenges might look different today,
Oh, right.
but they are still very real.
That's a good point.
Mm.
I mean, today we're grappling with issues like overcrowding, pollution, and inequality in many urban centers.
Exactly. So while we can admire those who built the first cities, it's important to acknowledge that they weren't perfect.
Yeah.
And today we face a similar challenge.
Right.
How do we ensure that our cities are sustainable and equitable for everyone?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Which is a big question.
How do we take what we've learned from the past
Right.
and apply it to the present to create better, more sustainable cities for the future?
It's a question we all have a stake in answering, but I think it's important to remember that humans have always been problem solvers.
Mm.
And just as our ancestors found solutions to the challenges they faced, I believe we can too.
I love that positive outlook.
Well,
I think it's easy to get overwhelmed by the problems,
yeah.
but looking back at history can remind us of just how innovative and adaptable humans can be.
Absolutely. And who knows what amazing innovations lie ahead.
Right.
We're standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, and we have the potential to build upon their achievements and create truly remarkable urban environments for generations to come.
Okay. I'm feeling inspired now.
Right.
But before we get too carried away thinking about the future of cities,
Okay.
let's take a moment to recap what we've learned about those first ancient cities.
Okay.
We started by imagining life before cities,
Right. Yeah.
highlighting the nomadic lifestyle of hunter-gatherers.
Exactly. Then we traveled to the Fertile Crescent,
Yes. Where agriculture took root and the first cities began to emerge.
and we talked about how the unique geography of this region, particularly those incredible rivers, made it possible to produce surplus food.
Yes, and we saw how that surplus of food led to some really important changes. Specialization trade and more complex social structures.
Right. It's amazing how one key development can have such a ripple effect across society.
It is. And from there, we explored the rise of the first cities themselves. We
Hmm.
talked about Mesopotamia and its city-states, each functioning like an independent mini-kingdom, and Egypt with its unified nation-state ruled by a pharaoh.
We delved into those social hierarchies, the pyramid structure with the king or pharaoh at the top and slaves, sadly, at the very bottom.
Right.
And we discussed the crucial role of religion and how intertwined it was with governance.
Yes, and of course, we can't forget about the invention of writing.
Right.
It was such a monumental development that marked the end of prehistory and ushered in the era of recorded history.
As we've been talking about all of this.
I've been thinking about those ancient city dwellers.
Yeah,
They weren't just names in a history book.
right.
They were real people dealing with the challenges of their time,
Yeah.
building their lives and creating something new. What was it like to live in those first cities?
That's a great question. It's easy to get caught up in the broad historical sweep and forget that these were real people, just like us, trying to make their way in the world. Imagine yourself walking through the bustling streets of an ancient city.
Okay, I'm trying to picture the sights, the sounds, the smells. What would I see around me?
You might see towering ziggurats reaching towards the sky or massive pyramids dominating the landscape. You'd hear the clang of metal from the workshops, the shouts of traders in the marketplace, the chanting of priests in the temple.
I can almost hear it now. It must have been quite a sensory experience.
Absolutely. And think about the smells, the aroma of freshly baked bread from the bakeries, the pungent spices in the marketplace, maybe even the less pleasant smells of animal waste and open sewage.
It's a good reminder that these cities weren't always glamorous,
Yeah.
but they were vibrant and full of life.
They were.
And they were shaping the future in ways those people could never have imagined.
That's right. They were laying the groundwork for the cities we live in today, for the interconnected world we inhabit, and for the very way we organize ourselves as a society, their innovations, their struggles, their triumphs. It's all part of our story.
I think that's a perfect place to pause our deep dive. We'll be back shortly to wrap up our exploration of ancient cities and leave you with some final thoughts.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were really trying to imagine what life was like in these cities.
Yeah.
The sights, the sounds,
Hmm.
even the smells.
It really helps us connect with them on a human level, even though thousands of years separate us.
It really does. And it makes me realize that
Yeah.
despite all the technological advancements we've made, we're still driven by the same basic needs and desires as those early urban dwellers.
For sure.
The need for food, shelter, community, and a sense of purpose.
That's so true. And when we think about it that way, the story of ancient cities becomes a story about human resilience, creativity, and our incredible capacity for reinvention. It's a story that continues to unfold in our cities today.
Each generation adding its own chapter.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of ancient cities, what's the key takeaway
Sure.
you want to leave our listener with?
I think the biggest takeaway is this: the legacy of those ancient cities is all around us.
Okay.
The next time you walk through your own city,
Mm-hmm.
take a moment to appreciate the echoes of the past.
Okay.
The roads, the buildings, the way we organize ourselves. It's all built upon foundations laid thousands of years ago.
That's a powerful thought. We're part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
A continuum stretching back to those first tentative steps towards urban life.
Exactly. And that story is far from over. As we navigate the challenges of the 21st century, we can draw inspiration from those who came before us. They were innovators, problem solvers, and they adapted to their environment to create something new.
And now it's our turn to do the same. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to shape our cities into thriving, sustainable, and equitable places for generations to come.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on.
It has been an absolute pleasure diving into this fascinating topic with you, and to our listener, we hope you enjoyed this journey back in time. We encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions about the world around you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment.